Hello Midnights. Next up, the practice of exorcism, faith, psychology, and the battle for the human soul. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. Exorcism, a practice as old as recorded history, continues to captivate and confound. Beyond the often sensationalized media portrayals, a profound and complex tradition lies deeply interwoven with religious belief, human psychology, and the eternal struggle between perceived good and evil. This article delves deeper into the nuances of exorcism, exploring its intricate rituals, the theological debates surrounding it, modern scientific perspectives, and the ongoing ethical challenges it presents. To fully appreciate the complexities and implications of exorcism, readers benefit from a foundational understanding of the underlying belief systems, historical context of mental health, and the cultural landscape in which these practices exist. The concept of malevolent spiritual entities varies significantly across different belief systems, each influencing the understanding and practice of exorcism. In Christian demonology, demons are primarily understood as fallen angels who, alongside Lucifer, Satan, rebelled against God. These beings are believed to be incorporeal, intelligent, and malevolent, with their power limited by God's will and divine permission. Their primary objective is not merely mischief but the temptation of humanity into sin, drawing individuals away from God, and ultimately leading souls to spiritual ruin. This malevolent influence can manifest as spiritual, psychological, and sometimes physical harm, culminating in the extreme case of possession. Demons are seen as actively working against God's plan for salvation, and various theological traditions, drawing from biblical texts, such as the Gospels, particularly the accounts of Jesus casting out demons, and Pauline epistles discussing spiritual warfare, and patristic writings, posit a hierarchy among them, with distinct roles and levels of malevolence, often led by figures like Beelzebub or Asmodeus. The ultimate goal of demonic activity, from a Christian perspective, is to sever humanity's relationship with God, leading to eternal damnation. In Islamic demonology, the belief in jinn, intelligent, invisible beings created by Allah from smokeless fire, is fundamental. Unlike angels, created from light, and humans, from earth, jinn possess free will, allowing them to be righteous, neutral, or evil. The shayatin, devils/satans, represent the inherently evil jinn, led by Iblis, Satan, who famously refused to prostrate before Adam. While some jinn might be mischievous or cause minor harm, shayatin are considered the primary source of evil influence. Their methods include tempting humans, through waswasa, insidious whispers that sow doubt and evil thoughts, causing illness, afflicting people with nightmares, and in severe cases, leading to full possession, mass. They are distinct entities from human souls and are acknowledged as part of Allah's creation, against whom believers must seek refuge through prayer, recitation of the Quran, and adherence to Islamic teachings. The concept of evil eye, ain, and magic, sire, are also closely related afflictions that Ruqyah aims to address. In Jewish mysticism and demonology, ancient Jewish texts, such as the Talmud, mention shadim as invisible entities, sometimes mischievous, sometimes harmful, often associated with wild or impure places. They are less systematized than Christian or Islamic demons. More prominent in later Jewish folklore and Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, is the dybbuk. A dybbuk is specifically the dislocated, restless soul of a dead person, usually a wicked or troubled individual, that possesses a living body. This possession is often seen as a temporary refuge for the lost soul, a way for it to complete an unfulfilled mission, or a punishment for either the living person's sins or the dybbuk's own transgressions. Critically, dybbuk possession is generally about an errant human soul, not a primordial demonic entity in the Christian sense of fallen angels. The aim of exorcism in this context is often to bring peace to the dybbuk and help it move on to its proper spiritual realm, rather than simply expelling it as an external enemy. The ritual may involve speaking to the dybbuk, understanding its grievances, and ultimately persuading it to leave through prayer and ritual, sometimes involving a minyan, quorum of 10 adult Jewish men. The article emphasizes the crucial role of medical and psychological evaluation. This distinction is vital because, for much of history, what is now recognized as mental illness, for example, epilepsy, schizophrenia, severe depression, dissociative disorders, was frequently attributed to supernatural causes like demonic possession, divine punishment, or witchcraft. Treatments often involved religious rituals, trephination, drilling holes in the skull to release evil spirits, or even persecution. The development of modern psychiatry and neuroscience, particularly from the 18th and 19th centuries onwards, gradually shifted the understanding of these conditions from spiritual afflictions to medical disorders, rooted in biology, psychology, and social factors. This led to the development of clinical diagnostics and evidence-based treatments, creating a significant tension between traditional religious views of possession and contemporary scientific understanding. This historical progression highlights the continuous human effort to categorize and address suffering, whether through spiritual or empirical lenses, with a growing emphasis on evidence-based approaches to health. For many believers, particularly within charismatic and evangelical Christianity, life is viewed as an ongoing conflict between God's forces and those of Satan and his demons. This spiritual warfare manifests not only in personal temptation but also in broader societal evils, injustices, and spiritual oppression affecting communities and nations. Deliverance ministers often speak of territorial spirits or generational curses that can influence entire families or regions. Exorcism, or deliverance as it is often termed in these circles, is seen as a direct engagement in this warfare, aiming to liberate individuals or even territories from demonic influence, actively resisting and overcoming demonic forces in the world. This proactive stance views believers as soldiers in a cosmic conflict, empowered by God to dismantle spiritual strongholds, often involving intense prayer, fasting, and declarations of spiritual authority. Different cultures perceive and explain these phenomena in unique ways. The Islamic insider perspective reflects how people within a specific culture or religious group understand and explain spirit possession. For them, it is a lived spiritual reality with specific cultural meanings, rituals, and prescribed responses rooted in their worldview. This includes the narratives, beliefs, and experiences of those who claim to be possessed or perform exorcisms. The etic, outsider/scientific, perspective, conversely, is how external observers, from a scientific, psychological, or different cultural background, interpret the same phenomena, often as psychological conditions, cultural performances, or social expressions influenced by belief systems. Understanding this distinction helps readers appreciate why religious adherents genuinely believe in possession while others seek purely naturalistic explanations, and how both perspectives can coexist without necessarily invalidating each other's frameworks, emphasizing the importance of respecting diverse ontologies and epistemologies. To truly grasp the profound implications of exorcism, one might consider the individual as a house or temple. In this metaphor, the self, with its mind, will, and spirit, is the sanctity of that dwelling, imbued with inherent dignity and intended for divine habitation. In a state of health and balance, the house is well maintained, its doors and windows secure, its occupants, the self, living in harmony, guided by conscience and reason. Temptation and vulnerability might be likened to cracks in the foundation or unlocked windows, weaknesses that allow negative influences, like strong winds or petty thieves, to enter and cause minor disturbances. These are common and can be addressed through personal effort, spiritual discipline, for example, prayer, meditation, self-control, and drawing upon divine grace, often referred to as spiritual hygiene or spiritual self-care. When the negative influence becomes more persistent, like a persistent prowler around the house or loud banging on the walls, this is akin to oppression/vexation. The occupants are disturbed, fearful, and harassed, experiencing significant distress, but their internal control of the house remains largely intact. They are under attack, but not yet overthrown. This can manifest as recurring intrusive thoughts, unexplained misfortunes, or physical afflictions. Possession is the ultimate invasion. The doors are breached, the windows shattered, and an unwelcome intruder has taken residence, attempting to seize control of the very architecture and the will of the occupants. The individual's self is still present, often trapped and tormented, retaining some degree of consciousness and suffering, but their capacity to control their own house, their body, speech, and actions, is severely compromised, their autonomy usurped by an external will. The exorcist, then, becomes the spiritual architect and warrior, called upon to restore the integrity of the dwelling, expel the intruder, and reclaim the house for its rightful owner through the power of divine intervention. This internal battle for the soul is externalized in the ritual, a desperate plea for divine intervention to restore order to a chaotic, invaded existence and re-establish the individual's spiritual sovereignty and freedom. The presence of exorcistic practices throughout history points to a fundamental human attempt to comprehend and combat perceived malevolent influences. Evidence of exorcistic practices dates back to ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia and Egypt, where texts describe elaborate rituals to ward off evil spirits and address illnesses attributed to demonic influence. Priests and specialized healers played a crucial role, often employing complex symbolic acts, potent spoken formulas, incantations, and various forms of sympathetic magic. Archaeological findings, such as amulets and inscribed tablets, further attest to these ancient beliefs. In ancient Greece, madness and certain illnesses were sometimes seen as divine punishment or the result of demonic influence, with oracles and priests performing rites to appease deities or drive out spirits. Roman practices included spells, depictions or curse tablets, to avert evil omens or inflict harm on enemies, often with a strong emphasis on maintaining pax deorum, peace with the gods, and averting malevolent forces that could disrupt social order. In Abrahamic religions, the Catholic Church, headquartered in the Vatican City, holds a unique and highly formalized position regarding exorcism. It does not dismiss the reality of demonic possession and maintains a specific, codified rite for its expulsion, rooted in its theological conviction that Satan and various evil spirits are real, personal beings who act in the world. The New Testament recounts Jesus performing numerous exorcisms as a central aspect of his public ministry, demonstrating his divine authority over evil. This biblical precedent forms the bedrock of Christian practice, and early Christian communities continued this practice, seeing it as a tangible expression of God's power and a potent means of evangelization. Over centuries, the Catholic Church formalized its rite, developing specific prayers, blessings, and detailed procedures outlined in the rite of exorcism. The exorcism is et supplicationibus quibusdam, first codified in the Roman ritual and revised most recently in 1999 and updated in 2004. This formalization, overseen by the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, a dicastery of the Roman Curia in the Vatican, aims to prevent abuse, ensure careful discernment between genuine possession and other conditions, and guarantee the ritual is performed with proper theological understanding and strict ecclesiastical authority. The Vatican, through its various offices, provides the theological and canonical framework for this practice, emphasizing extreme caution, prolonged prayer, rigorous discernment, including psychiatric evaluation, and spiritual preparedness as paramount requirements for any authorized exorcist. In Islam, exorcism, known as Ruqyah, is primarily a spiritual healing practice involving the recitation of specific verses from the Quran and authentic prophetic supplications, dua. These include foundational verses like Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter, which is a powerful prayer for guidance and healing, Ayatul Kursi, the throne verse, revered for its comprehensive declaration of God's power and sovereignty over all creation, including jinn and devils, and the last three surahs, Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and An-Nas, specifically recited for protection against evil eye, magic, envy, and the whispers of jinn and humans. It is typically performed by a pious Muslim with sound knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah, the teachings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad, and its legitimacy is firmly rooted in the Prophet Muhammad's own practices and teachings, emphasizing seeking refuge in Allah alone and the belief in the healing power of divine revelation. Unlike formal Catholic exorcism, there is no single, globally centralized authority or fixed liturgical rite for Ruqyah. Rather, it is a practice adhered to by various Islamic scholars and practitioners based on established prophetic tradition and community needs. The practice often involves blowing on the afflicted person, or on water or olive oil for them to consume or apply. Many other traditions, including shamanic traditions across indigenous cultures globally, also feature exorcistic practices. Shamans, acting as intermediaries between the human and spirit worlds, often undertake spirit journeys, employ drumming, chanting, smoke cleansing, for example, with sage, cedar, or palo santo, plant medicines, and elaborate communal rituals to retrieve lost souls, banish intrusive or malevolent spirits, or rebalance spiritual energies within an individual or community. These practices are deeply embedded in the animistic worldviews of these cultures, where spirits are seen as active agents in the natural world. While not typically focused on possession in the Western sense of a demonic entity, Buddhism and Hinduism have practices for dispelling negative energies, appeasing malevolent spirits, or purifying spaces. Buddhist rituals might involve specific mantras, sacred sounds or syllables, mudras, symbolic hand gestures, and visualization techniques aimed at cultivating compassion and wisdom to overcome inner and outer obstacles, including harmful spiritual influences. Hindu traditions feature elaborate ceremonies, pujas, to invoke benevolent deities and ward off malevolent influences, bhutas or pratas, often involving offerings, hymns, and the invocation of divine protection, sometimes even involving the creation of mandalas or ritual diagrams. The belief in demonic possession and the necessity of exorcism stems from a worldview that posits an active spiritual dimension where unseen forces profoundly influence human existence. Many belief systems underpinning exorcism operate on a dualistic understanding of the cosmos, where benevolent, divine, and malevolent, demonic/evil, forces are in perpetual, often unseen, conflict, a cosmic struggle that plays out in the lives of individuals and the fabric of society. Demonic possession is seen as a direct, invasive assault by evil, a horrific attempt to hijack an individual's free will, autonomy, and spiritual integrity, sometimes even a strategic maneuver in a larger cosmic war for souls. This framework provides a deeply meaningful explanation for profound suffering and otherwise inexplicable phenomena, offering a sense of order to chaos by attributing it to a discernible, albeit spiritual, enemy. For religious practitioners, exorcism is never a purely human act. It is understood as an exercise of divine authority and delegated power, invoked through specific prayers and rituals. This power is believed to be granted by God, or divine beings, to specific individuals, priests, shamans, imams, or inherent in sacred texts and rituals. In Christianity, the power to cast out demons is seen as a gift from God, exercised in the name of Jesus Christ, affirming God's ultimate sovereignty over evil and his redemptive power. The authority stems from the apostles who were given power by Christ to cast out demons, Mark 6:7, Luke 10:17-20. Similarly, in Islam, the power of Ruqyah comes from the words of Allah's revelation in the Quran, which carries immense spiritual efficacy, and from the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad. Exorcism posits a personal evil, malevolent entities with intellect, will, and a malevolent agenda, rather than merely an abstract concept of evil or negative energy. This personification allows for direct confrontation and expulsion. It also raises profound theological questions about the origin of evil, theodicy, divine permission for suffering, and the precise boundaries of human vulnerability in the face of spiritual malevolence. While distinct from possession, theological frameworks often link sin and temptation to potential openings or vulnerabilities for demonic influence. Unconfessed grave sin, participation in occult practices, such as Ouija boards, dabbling in magic, or Satanism, or persistent engagement with serious evil are sometimes believed to weaken an individual's spiritual defenses, making them more susceptible to extraordinary demonic activity, though not necessarily leading directly to possession. Repentance, confession, and spiritual cleansing are therefore often considered crucial preventative measures and integral parts of the post-exorcism healing process, aiming to restore the individual's relationship with the divine. In contemporary discourse, the concept of possession often clashes sharply with scientific understanding, leading to a complex interplay of psychological and spiritual interpretations. A cornerstone of responsible exorcistic practice, particularly in Catholicism, is the rigorous process of differential diagnosis to rule out any medical and psychological conditions that might mimic symptoms of possession. Symptoms historically associated with possession, including convulsions, speaking in unknown languages, glossolalia or as anaglossy, exhibiting unusual strength, aversion to sacred objects, dramatic personality shifts, or knowledge of hidden facts, cryptomnesia or clairvoyance, can often be explained by neurological disorders such as epilepsy, manifesting in seizures, altered consciousness, and postictal states, Tourette's syndrome, with involuntary vocalizations in movements, neurological lesions, certain brain infections, for example, encephalitis, and conditions like functional neurological disorder, which can cause involuntary movements, vocalizations, altered states of consciousness, and unusual behaviors that can appear demonic to the untrained eye. Many symptoms also align with recognized psychiatric conditions, often exacerbated by extreme stress or trauma. For instance, schizophrenia affects around 0.3 to 0.7% of the general population worldwide, impacting about 21 million people globally, and can manifest with hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech, and erratic behavior. Similarly, dissociative identity disorder, DID, characterized by the presence of two or more distinct personality states, alters, that recurrently take control of behavior, is diagnosed in about 1.1 to 1.5% of the global population. These alters can present with different voices, memories, and mannerisms, easily mistaken for separate entities. Other conditions like bipolar disorder, with its manic and depressive episodes, conversion disorder, where psychological distress manifests as physical symptoms without a neurological basis, for example, paralysis, blindness, or seizures. Various anxiety disorders, and severe personality disorders can also present symptoms that are historically or culturally interpreted as possession. Studies indicate that severe psychiatric disorders are often misdiagnosed, for example, As many as 76.8% of patients with bipolar disorders and 50% of patients with depressive disorders were found to be misdiagnosed in some studies, underscoring the critical importance of thorough clinical evaluation. Substance abuse, including intoxication or withdrawal from certain illicit drugs, prescription medications, or even severe alcohol abuse, can induce extreme behavioral changes, vivid hallucinations, paranoia, and altered mental states that might be mistaken for spiritual affliction. Moreover, trauma responses, particularly complex or repeated trauma, for example, childhood abuse, can lead to profound dissociative states, flashbacks, extreme emotional dysregulation, and behavioral changes where the individual may feel or appear not themselves, easily interpreted as an external entity controlling the individual's actions or thoughts. This is particularly relevant given the high comorbidity between trauma and dissociative disorders. The manifestation of possession can be heavily shaped by cultural expectations, leading to culture-bound syndromes where specific sets of symptoms are recognized and interpreted within a particular cultural context, for example, Leda in Southeast Asia, Piblok talk in Arctic communities, Koro in East Asia, Maldojo in Hispanic cultures. These syndromes demonstrate how psychological distress can be expressed through culturally sanctioned idioms of distress. Mass hysteria or social contagion, for example, in revival meetings or highly emotional religious gatherings, can also lead to groups of people exhibiting similar possession-like symptoms. In most systematic studies, it is predominantly women who were identified as being possessed, though a large meta-analysis of dissociative trance disorder, including possession states, showed only a small predominance of women affected, 1.16 to 1.0. The power of belief and suggestion is immense, meaning the ritual of exorcism can act as a powerful placebo, leading to a genuine subjective improvement or cessation of symptoms for those who deeply believe in its efficacy and the authority of the practitioner. Conversely, intense fear and belief in demonic power, the nocebo effect, can exacerbate existing symptoms or even induce new ones. The dramatic environment of an exorcism, with its authoritative figures, solemn prayers, and intense focus, can profoundly influence a person's psychological state, potentially inducing an acute dissociative or trance state. A critical ethical concern is the potential for misdiagnosis. If a treatable medical or mental health condition is attributed to demonic possession, and proper medical or psychological care is withheld or delayed, the consequences can be dire, ranging from prolonged suffering, worsening of symptoms, to permanent disability or even death. This underscores the absolute necessity for rigorous interdisciplinary collaboration between religious authorities and healthcare professionals when dealing with individuals presenting with possession-like symptoms. Sadly, there have been documented instances of charlatans exploiting vulnerable individuals under the guise of performing exorcisms, involving severe financial exploitation, physical harm, for example, through restraint or violent actions, psychological manipulation, and even sexual abuse, leaving victims deeply traumatized and disillusioned, and often worse off than before. This highlights the crucial need for stringent oversight, transparent ethical guidelines, and robust accountability mechanisms within religious institutions to protect those seeking help. Despite the advances of modern science, the practice of exorcism persists and, in some areas, has reportedly seen a resurgence. The Catholic Church maintains a highly formalized and cautious approach to exorcism, deeply rooted in its theological traditions and canon law. The rite of exorcism is a rarely performed, solemn liturgy that emphasizes prayer, unwavering faith, and the inherent authority of the Church. The process involves initial assessment and investigation, where a priest or bishop assesses the case, gathering extensive information from the individual, family, spiritual director, and witnesses, often over an extended period. This comprehensive review includes the individual's spiritual history, any involvement with the occult, for example, Ouija boards, Satanism, seances, and their general well-being. A medical and psychological evaluation is a crucial and non-negotiable step, outlined in the rite of exorcism itself. The individual must undergo thorough medical and psychological examinations by qualified professionals, physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, to definitively rule out any natural, clinical explanations for their symptoms. Only after all natural causes are thoroughly exhausted and a diagnosis of spiritual affliction is considered reasonable by both medical and theological experts, typically through a multidisciplinary consultation, is a major exorcism even contemplated. This strict requirement is strongly emphasized by the Vatican and enshrined in the Church's guidelines to prevent harm and misdiagnosis. The Church carefully distinguishes types of demonic activity between ordinary demonic activity, common temptation, which is a universal human experience, and extraordinary activity, which includes obsession, persistent, tormenting thoughts, vexation, external physical attacks, diabolical oppression, broader external attacks on well-being, and perfect possession, the most severe and rarest form, where the demon takes over control of the individual's body, often exhibiting preternatural knowledge, unusual strength, or a profound aversion to sacred objects. If, after meticulous discernment, a case is deemed to involve genuine demonic possession, a bishop-appointed priest, the exorcist, performs the rite. Canon law, for example, Canon 1172 of the Code of Canon Law, explicitly states that no one can legitimately perform exorcisms over the possessed unless he has obtained special and express permission from the local ordinary, the diocesan bishop. This ensures strict control, accountability, and proper ecclesiastical authority. The rite itself is a solemn, prescribed liturgy involving specific prayers, including the Litany of Saints, the Our Father, Hail Mary, and prayers of command, readings from Scripture, the use of holy water, the cross, the laying on of hands, and the solemn command to the demon to depart in the name of Jesus Christ and by the authority of the Church. It is a lengthy and spiritually, and sometimes physically, demanding process for all involved, requiring profound faith, perseverance, and often the assistance of auxiliary priests and lay faithful for prayer and support. The Vatican's role extends beyond providing the ritual text, it actively supports the ongoing formation of exorcists. Institutions like the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum in Rome offer specialized courses and a diploma in exorcism and prayers of liberation to educate priests on the theological, psychological, and medical aspects of this ministry, emphasizing a balanced approach. This reflects the Holy See's commitment to ensuring that exorcisms are approached with both spiritual rigor and prudent discernment. The International Association of Exorcists, AIE, formally approved by the Vatican in 2014, boasts around 900 members from 58 countries, providing a global network for shared knowledge, training, and support among those engaged in this specialized ministry, fostering best practices and adherence to church guidelines. Reports from various dioceses globally, particularly in countries like Italy, Poland, and the United States, indicate a growing number of requests for exorcism. For instance, 500,000 people are reportedly seeking exorcisms every year in Italy alone, with some Italian exorcists reporting seeing 30 to 50 cases a day. This surge in demand is often attributed by exorcists to a rise in occult practices, for example, spiritualism, neo-paganism, Satanism, involvement with Ouija boards, a decline in traditional religious faith and moral values, increased spiritual seeking in non-traditional ways, and a heightened sense of spiritual anxiety and fragmentation in modern, secularized societies that may leave individuals feeling spiritually vulnerable. The number of priests attending the Vatican's annual exorcism course has also more than doubled, and in 2018, the International Association of Exorcists declared the increasing requests a pastoral emergency, prompting the Vatican to underscore the importance of proper training and caution. However, it's important to note that even among exorcists, it's estimated that a very small percentage of these reported cases ultimately require a major exorcism, with the vast majority being addressed through prayers of liberation, spiritual direction, the sacrament of reconciliation, confession, pastoral counseling, or referral to medical and psychological professionals. Among the most widely known and debated Catholic exorcism cases are those that have captured public imagination and often served as inspiration for popular culture, shaping modern perceptions. The Exorcism of Roland Doe, 1949, a pseudonym for a young American boy whose true identity is believed to be Ronald Hunkeler, gained immense notoriety. The events began after the boy reportedly experimented with a Ouija board following the death of his aunt. Symptoms included unexplained scratching noises, furniture moving, objects flying, and the boy exhibiting violent reactions to religious symbols, speaking in guttural voices, some claiming Latin, and displaying unusual strength. Multiple Catholic priests were involved in the months-long process, which spanned several locations including a hospital in St. Louis. Claims included the boy levitating and violent attacks against the priests, with one priest allegedly having his nose broken by a mattress spring thrown by Roland. This case, meticulously documented in a diary by one of the assisting priests, Father Raymond J. Bishop, ultimately became the primary inspiration for William Peter Blatty's 1971 novel The Exorcist and the subsequent iconic 1973 film. While the film took creative liberties, changing the gender to a young girl, Regan McNeil, many of the key alleged phenomena were drawn from the Doe case, significantly influencing the cultural understanding of demonic possession. The case of Anneliese Michel, 1976, in Germany is another deeply disturbing and widely discussed example that serves as a cautionary tale. A young, deeply religious Catholic woman, Anneliese had a history of severe psychiatric illness, including epilepsy and what was later diagnosed as manic-depressive psychosis, for which she had received medical treatment. Over a period of 10 months, believing herself to be possessed by multiple demons, Anneliese underwent 67 exorcisms performed by two Catholic priests, Father Ernst Alt and Father Arnold Renz. During these sessions, which were recorded, she reportedly exhibited classic possession symptoms, including speaking in various voices, displaying unusual strength, and expressing profound aversion to religious objects. Her condition deteriorated significantly as the exorcisms continued. She refused food and water, ultimately dying of severe malnutrition and dehydration at the age of 23. The subsequent trial of the two priests and Anneliese's parents for negligent homicide became a sensational public event. The court ruled that Anneliese's death was preventable and directly linked to the cessation of medical treatment in favor of the exorcisms. The priests and parents were found guilty of negligent homicide and sentenced to 6 months in prison, suspended with probation. The Anneliese Michel case remains a stark reminder of the potential dangers of misdiagnosing mental illness as demonic possession and the critical importance of prioritizing medical care. It led to stricter guidelines within the Catholic Church regarding the performance of exorcisms, particularly emphasizing the absolute necessity of ruling out mental and physical illness before any exorcism is considered. The case inspired the 2005 film The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which explored the legal and ethical dilemmas surrounding such practices.